commits suicide and entombs themselves. They never go back, and then before you know it, the Secret Service, one by one, is taken out, and then the queen is a sitting duck, right? So that's how it works. Now, how can you get your hands on some of this fun stuff? Some of it already exists. This is a Botanigard, OMRI approved for organic applications. Yeah, fungi are pretty sensitive to UV light, so you would do this in the late afternoon, early evening. This one, I would call this more of a broad spectrum entomopathogen because it's listed for many different flying insects. And I'm going to tell you how to improve on that. Botanigard. You could spray your field with this, and I would probably guess that you would probably only get 10% luck, meaning you would get 10% mortality or 10% mummification of the bug that you're looking for, right? Now, I don't like doing that because you might be mummifying insects that are beneficial as well. You follow? So we're going to show you how to deal with this. So that's Beauveria botanigard, how you can make your own more target specific. So there you go, you spray it, and then you get some aphids that are fully mummified. Well, in order to go through that process, those spores, those conidia, had to recognize those aphids, and a bunch of them didn't. So now you are cultivating that fungus. So now what you're going to do is take these aphids and train it forward. Okay? So one-time application there. And so this is what I did. Most mushroom farmers will have a fungus gnat problem, right? Fungus gnats are it's just part of the business. You try to keep the populations down. You can use sticky mats. You definitely do not use pesticides in a mushroom farm. Mushrooms absorb everything from their environment. You spray it, it's going in. All right, it doesn't have time to remediate that. So there's only one way to farm mushrooms, and that's organically. Okay. Now, so I took some of that Botanigard, and then I ordered some fruit flies from a biological supply company. So what I was going to do was train, before I released Botanigard into my whole fruiting room, I want to target just these particular insects themselves so I can screen and train forward that fungus to attack mostly just these fungus gnats. All right, so I typically don't ask anything for Christmas or my birthday, so this was my birthday present last year. I ordered 100 virgin fruit flies. Imagine if you see that on your bank statement. What the hell, virgin? What? And it just cuts off. You know, 100 virgin ... And so I shot this Botanigard down in there. It only mummified like 2% of that population. So what I do, I took those two, and then I put them back into another vial with fresh females, and then it mummified them 100%. You see what happened? So it basically selected the strain or the ecotype out of a commercial product. And so here's what you can do as well. And they've done this. Clemson's been all over Indonesia training villagers on how to do this. We're going to do this in Jamaica this spring. We're going to go out looking for infected bugs. And just to give you an example, you know, I've been to Jamaica twice, and the last time I was there, I was touring some sugarcane fields, and I'm on this really, really wide road, and I didn't understand that. Why is this road so wide? And they said, this isn't a road, it's an airstrip. And I said, what's that for? And they said, to spray the fields, all the sugarcane. 50%, 50% of the sugarcane in Jamaica is destroyed by termites every year. 50%. That's a huge number. So what are we going to do? Same thing we can do here is look for infected insects that are already there. All right? We're not going to import anything. We're not going to create another kudzu problem, are we? So we're going to look for infected insects, and then we're going to create an insect area where we can raise an insect rearing facility, and you can raise the insects of choice. So if you find one organism, one little beetle, or one little emerald ash borer, and we can grind that up, or put it in a humidity chamber, you can put it inside a little glass with a wet paper towel, and it'll completely form all this conidia, which are infectious spores. Then you can take this one and treat all of these First of all, you have to find out if it's pathogenic or not, right? If you've collected the right strain. So once you collect all of these here, this is without a lab, then you can take all those bugs, and then put them in a blender. And then you can just blend up some, make a beetle margarita or something. Right? You're going to blend them up after they produce all this conidia, blend it up, and then you can strain it, and now you have made your own biological pesticide from one tiny little beetle. Right? You can do that. They're doing that in fields over in Indonesia where the locusts are destroying all the fields, and the poor villagers were buying hundreds and hundreds of tons of these pesticides every year and just carpet bombing their fields. Well, someone showed up and said, hey, look at that, there's an infected locust right there. And they just took a mortar and pestle and just ground up the grasshopper in a little hut, and they put it in a backpack sprayer, and they completely solved their own problem. One grasshopper, right? So you can also, from a laboratory point of view, if you have access to one, or if you, let's say you send that beetle to someone like myself, I would take that one beetle, and then I would, you can also clone it from the wood it's connected to. You would get it into the gel, you'd cultivate it out, and then we would start growing it on grain. So this is how they grow it commercially. So I've been studying how to grow and cultivate entomopathogens lately. It's fairly easy. Now, if you're just growing it on grain, what's that problem? Anyone? Grain is not an insect. So it can lose the ability to recognize the insects. So what do you might have to add to the grain? Dead insects, dead bodies. So I've been out collecting insects and having to mix, this sounds terrible, isn't it? You have to mix in the insects so it actually has the cuticle, so it can maintain that cuticle recognition in the grain. So if you keep cultivating it in the lab over and over and over, it will lose its ability to penetrate that insect and mummify it. Okay? This is what I do on Friday nights. I can't help it. So we cultivate the grain. We can make it in pretty large numbers, but imagine that from one sample, within just several weeks, you can make tons of this particular pesticide. So it's great for emergency, like pandemic-style outbreaks of insect problems. Yeah.
What's the solution you use?
Solution?
Yeah, what fluid?
Oh, the fluid? The agar?
Yeah.
I use potato agar, but I also have to mix in the bodies of the insect in question too. So if it's ant, I use ant agar, beetle agar. I have to go out and collect them and grind them up. Hell of a way to go.
Does this work for spotted-winged Drosophila?
Yeah, so when you're talking about spotted-winged Drosophila, it would be the same tactic. So using that Bovaria, I would probably start with something like Botanicard and train them forward. There's a cherry grower out in Oregon who contacted me who's going to do the same thing. He's an organic cherry grower. Couldn't do anything about those. As soon as the cherries were about ripe, those flies flew in and just laid their eggs right at the time they were about ready to pick. So it's a huge problem, and I know it's already spreading to the East Coast. Right?
How do you find a dead SWD?
They are pretty small. You have to find them. They might be attached or underneath a branch or a twig or even on the cherries themselves. But guess this, you only need to find one. Here's what I would recommend, and this is a community effort, if you will. Take the insect in question that we really need to solve and create a most wanted poster. I'm being serious. And that's what I told them to do out west. And they even, out west, they even put it on an old Western style, poster like wanted with bullet holes through. A reward for those. We should be out looking for these insects and reward someone for turning them in. Because the more that we get turned in, the more ecotypes we can have, right? So, yeah, so what we're doing out west at the Cherry Grove is I told them to spray Botanicard whenever they see the fungus gnats around the fruit, and then to instruct all the workers, even in neighboring and competing orchards, to look for those and form a co-op where they can find and be on the lookout for those insects that are mummified. Yeah, a mummified fruit fly, that's a needle in a haystack. But I'm telling you, once you find a cordyceps or a mummified insect, like as small as those aphids were, your eye is trained. You see that it's mummified. You know, that's like, are we ever going to find a mummified woolly adelgid? Boy, can you see the difficulty there? They're already woolly.
It's been done.
It's been done. Yep.
Brad, could you take infested fruitlets and let the flies hatch in a jar and use the commercial product and get that 1 or 2% result, and now you have it?
Totally.
Good.
Yeah, so Michael did it. And that's exactly what we're doing. You can take the affected fruitlets, put it in a jar, and see where this orchard already gears turning. If you need help, let me know. That's exactly what you got to do. You can let them hatch out inside of a jar with a mesh on it for breathing, and then you can dose that jar with Botanigard, and then your computer can go blank. And then once those few percent come out, then you train forward. You create another jar, and you keep that fungus going. Yeah. But the actual getting them to form conidia is a little tricky. So once they become infected, once you collect their little bodies, you set them inside of a jar, a humidity jar, and then you really need to let them fully develop, like get really white and fluffy, because those are the infectious particles, the spores. In the back, sorry.
Once you grind them up with the pen and pencil, what solution do you put in there?
Just water. You just put it in water.
But does that have to be a certain solution, or would you?
Oh, a certain dilution rate. Yeah, I don't know how many colony-forming whatever spores you would need to classify as an infectious rate. I would just follow. You're going back to the same powder. You could use the same rate of dilution on the Botanigard label, right, for acreage or what have you. Now here's the interesting part: is once the spores are infected and you've treated your room or your space, the spores have a repellent effect. So mating pairs and guards won't come to the area if it's target specific. So they may not come back for a couple years. It could be 3 to 5 years before you ever have a problem again. So that's what's even cheaper, right? You've made an isolated, a more target specific entomopathogen, and now that you've treated your property or your orchard, that they might not take hold there because it's they recognize that as being a danger to their group. Mark.
Are there any wetting agents that you would use for the spore dispersal that won't interrupt the spore with osmotic difference?
I don't know of any wetting agents yet. I was going to be my next recommendation if there was, but
Yeah.
that's something we're still.
Jadam, the Korean farming has a wetting agent that